Well, Faith Forward leaders, I'm excited that you're joining us today because today's guest is the founder of Lead by Design Lab, a consulting firm. They specialize in leadership development, executive coaching, team effectiveness, design thinking, and strategic planning, really just any and everything you need to grow. LaToya has a PhD in social organizational psychology from Columbia University. She supports clients as they step into leadership roles, ensuring they manage teams from a place of purpose, inclusivity, empathy, and respect, all while showing up as their very best selves. And she definitely brings that out in me. She has coached entrepreneurs, corporate executives, nonprofit leaders, higher educational professionals, and dozens of other types of employees across various industries. And she leverages her experience as an adjunct faculty member at Columbia University and Stanford University, because one isn't enough. She has created and facilitated multiple training programs to aid businesses in sustainable growth. And LaToya Jordan, it is amazing to have you today, friend.
Thank you, friend. I'm listening like, yeah, I do that. Oh, wow. Because, when you hear it all together, you're like, wow, okay. So
I had to say it all. No, it's great to have you. When we were talking and preparing for this, one of the things you mentioned, I always love to hear from leaders, is what scripture they lean into. Because when we lead, we're not always leading from a place of just quoting scripture and outright evangelizing our teams. We're walking out our faith in the workplace. Absolutely. And you mentioned Philippians 2:3-4, which says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you not only look to his own interests, but also to the interests of others." How does this guide your day-to-day, girl?
It is literally me, right? I think if people, if you were to ask a set of people, how would they describe me? I think the very first word they'd say is like humble, right? That often even hearing you share all of it, I'm like, me, because it is never about me. It's always about others, right? It's always about the God in me and what I'm supposed to be doing in this world. And so it guides how I work in my business. It also guides how I support leaders and how I coach them to show up in humility, to show up in gratitude, to show up in power, but not boastful, right? Not conceited. There's a quote from this professor at Harvard, Dr. Carla Harris, and she says, leaders' jobs are to set the stage, not perform on it.
Oh,
and thank you, right?
That is so good.
So good. I'm like, that's right. And if more leaders learned to do that, then they would get all of the fruits that they are trying to manifest, right? It's not about us being out there, and it's not about me and my business or in how I support leaders to be that. I want to set the stage and then watch you shine. I want to watch all that you have within you really manifest. And I want to help to till that soil, but I don't need any of the accolades or any of the spotlight about it. And so for me, I take that scripture very seriously, both personally and professionally. And I hope that I instill that in those that I serve.
That's amazing. How do you work with a leader that is struggling with that? We talk about the turn in leadership where you go, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're someone promoting to C-suite, you've started as the person who was the catalyst, who was the doer though. And now you're the galvanizer. You should be moving the people to do it. How do you work with somebody in that transition? What are some things you recommend if they're struggling with taking those hands out of the pot and teaching other people to stir it?
Everyone I work with has that kind of jump to make. And so one of the things that I do is I really help them to kind of identify their motivation and their why. Why are they in this seat? Why are they aspiring for a C-suite role? Why are they in this C-suite role? So getting to their motivation is one little lever I will eventually pull. The other lever is legacy. What legacy do you want to leave? When you walk away, for whatever reason you walk away, what do you want to leave behind? Those two typically will help me to then say, aha, then you can't have your hands in everything. Because your motivation is, to see this company, blah, 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 whatever. Okay, so then they need you to show up this way. and your hands need to be there, not back there, right? You are trying to create the next you. So in order to do that, you got to give them a chance to do what you did so that you can help them so that they're ready for when you move on, right? So I use their own words, quite frankly, to help them see the value of shifting their hands from this part of the meal to this part of the meal. And then they're like, oh, of course, oh my God, of course I have to be the one to plan the menu and not make the peas anymore. I'm like, because she got to learn how to make the peas now, right? Of course. And it's so obvious to them, but you kind of have to help them to see the why. And Candice, one thing I've learned is that you also have to help them to see the win in their new version, right?
Yeah.
To your point, when you've been this individual contributor that's gotten so many accolades, that have been promoted, quite frankly, because of your excellence as an individual contributor, it's hard to let that go, right? There is a little bit of like, I know how to do this and I'm really good at it. So helping them to just give them a little glimmer of how they're really good at this new thing, and allow them to be proud of that. And maybe you have to like, fan their flame a little bit so they could be like, oh, you're right, I did do that. She did get a promotion. She did get, you helped her do that. Yay, you. Let's do that again. And then they're like, and then I'm able to like, step away a little bit because now they understand that this is their new role, right? As a C-suite.
Oh, so good.
So those are some of the little tools that I'll use to help them with that. But it is one that I've not encountered a leader who hasn't had that difficulty in transitioning.
What do you do when you're working with someone or you're working with someone on their team can't make the transition? Because those instances do exist. Absolutely. How do you identify and how do you decide? Because really the leadership team will decide sometimes that this person can't make that transition. Some people don't want to make that transition when they find out what the role is like.
Listen,
what do you do in those scenarios and how do you help people identify that?
So again, it goes back to that why, right? Like, why are you even aspiring? And I've had people say to me, because it was my turn, right? Like, I didn't really want this, but it's my turn on the leadership team. That person's leaving and I'm supposed to go next from a tenure perspective or whatever. And so I spend time unpacking that, right? Like, that is not going to keep you getting up in the morning to do this work. Is there something else about this role that makes you want to lead this team, this function? If we can't get to that, then I don't force that. Candice, I do talk about other things they can do to contribute. Is this really the right senior level role? Perhaps you are a better fit in a more individual contributor role. I do try to tease that out because, man, it's painful for a leader to do a leadership role, particularly a C-suite role, begrudgingly or because it's their responsibility. Oh man, that's hard. But if you can get them to connect to something that they want to be a part of, that maturation or whatever, then I'm able to link it and then help them. But without it, I have talked to higher level leaders who say, she don't want this job, y'all. Like,
well, I'm always fascinated. We go through the leap from being the doer to the manager, right? So then you're in like middle management. And then there's like this other big leap when you get to C-suite where you're going from operations a lot of times to vision. That isn't for everyone.
It's not. And it's okay. To me, I'd rather you be really honest and say that I'm actually not a visionary. I love getting my hands dirty. Then I'd rather you say that and us find the right seat on the bus for those gifts than for us to force it because they're the longest tenure, they're supposed to be whatever. Like, to me, that's crazy pants. And so shared something recently about, I was coaching this very senior person, and he was talking to me about what he loves to do. And it wasn't strategy. It was making videos. It was this other stuff. And he was like, they keep talking to me about this next level role and I just don't want it. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about what you do want. And let's figure out how do we package that so that it's attractive to the company, right? What's in it for them for you to do that thing? And so we were able to do that. And he felt so much better because he was like, now I feel like my boss understands what my gifts really are and what I really want to do. And I probably won't get a promotion, but I'll get a lateral role that I love. And I
Not
was,
to mention how great that he recognized that and was okay with it, because I
yeah,
feel like that's the biggest struggle
yeah.
sometimes.
It took us a while, but it was a whole bunch of me kind of asking these like questions week over week. And
Flip away.
yeah, like, what's that about? Like, you seem to be like, not as excited about someone talking to you about this senior next level role. And he's like, and so, yeah, it was a chip away at Candice for sure. But I was so proud of him that he got to that. And I was also really proud of the organization that they were willing to acknowledge that he wasn't the right fit for the next level. And that there were other seats on the bus that were lateral that could use his experience, and he could grow there. And then who knows, maybe 5 years from now he is ready for, a more of a visionary type role. But that's not him right now, and that's okay. So yeah, those things happen all the time. And I am not the right coach to push you to make you want it. No, I want you to be authentic and honest in the gifts and where you are today. And that to me leads to the best outcome.
Speaking of figuring out what people want to do and where they are for their quality of life and what they love, you and I have been friends long enough that I've seen you go through major career transition.
Yeah.
So you came from a pretty high level corporate position and started walking out that it was time for a change. So can you talk a little bit about making space for that change, making space to think about that change, and then taking a leap while starting a family, living in not a cheap area of the country?
Like, what was I thinking, right?
New York is super inexpensive.
New York is a little pricey. Yeah, ask my husband about that. But yeah, so to your point, I was doing what I thought I wanted to do, right? I was kind of moving up the career ladder in the career space that I had selected, and was pretty senior in my role. But as my husband and I were embarking on this other side, my personal life, we were starting a family, and I'd had my first child, and I loved it, right? I loved all the things, but I recognized that it was going to require a different schedule and flexibility than what the senior role and what potentially the next role would be. And we had to make a choice as a family. And it was really hard because you don't climb for years, right? 15 plus years. You don't get the degrees to align with that climb to then say, oh, let's just throw in the towel and, do something totally different. I had no expectation to do that. But at the same time, if I'm honest, I feel like God had planted seeds in me to, to dabble a little bit in consulting here, to do this little facilitation here. And I thought at the time that I was just helping friends who had their own businesses. And of course, I'll take vacation to help you with your business here or whatever, not realizing that those were seeds he was planting on purpose. And so when it was time for us to assess, how can we make this work? I was able to go back and say, well, I really loved helping my friend who was starting her own nonprofit, or I really love facilitating on this design thinking work. And all of a sudden I was like, why don't you do that full time? And so it made it less challenging, honestly, and less scary because I'd already done it a little bit. A little bit, but enough to know, to have confidence in it. And it wasn't off of it wasn't off of the field of study. It's the same type of work. I just was going to do it for myself and in support of tons of other leaders versus one company. So I feel, you know how it is. God already had a plan for us long, long, long before we even existed. And he was planting seeds long before they were seeds, right? Long before I knew they were seeds. So by the time that, August hit and we were like, let's try this, it actually wasn't scary. And I left my job. The last day was on a Thursday. My first gig was on that Monday, right? And that was nothing but perfect alignment and, orchestration. So it wasn't too far. It wasn't too bad.
And you've been 4 years in the game now?
4 years in the game, yeah.
4 years in the game.
Still going.
Well, in that transition, you've done something interesting that I don't know everyone fully understands how to do. Because when you start something as an entrepreneur, you're casting a wide net, right? You're like, I want all money, for lack of a better term.
All the money. Yes.
All the money. So if you're coming to me, I'm your girl.
Yes.
I'm your guy.
Yes.
I'll figure it out.
Yes.
But then you reach a point it's so true. You reach a point where you realize there are things that are your niche.
Yeah.
They're your strengths, your skill sets, the people you work, in your case, the people that you seem to be able to speak into more strongly, or that you can leverage your skill sets with to help more. And we will all recognize that, but that is a hard leap to go. I recognize that. I'm also going to start letting go of the clients that don't fit into that box. And in 4 years, you've really built a couple of niches for yourself. Everything from, you talk about imposter syndrome with minorities a lot. And I love your posts about that because they're super encouraging. And then also in that higher ed sector, which is just really interesting because it's not what you came from.
No.
So can you talk a little bit about how you've investigated that and how you keep pressing into the things you're good at and how you actually take the leap to let go of the things that aren't your fit?
Oh man, that is loaded. That is a lot. Those are a lot of things, but let me see if I can share succinctly.
Yes.
I think the first side is what did I wish for when I was becoming a senior leader? What did I wish people would have helped me with? And how do I share a bit more of my experience in support of helping others? So that's where you see that content around imposter syndrome or showing up authentically or whatever. That's coming from like me speaking to my younger self, quite frankly. And if I can coach someone or offer a service to help my younger self, then I would have felt so fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
And so that for me was an easy kind of quote unquote niche to fall into, because I realized that in search of getting all the money, I was speaking to everyone but me. Me.
That's good. That's good.
And so it started to connect to me like, this is so generic. Like this is all, executive coaches. This is all leadership program. But which one would have helped me in my moment of despair and fear? And so I'm able to just speak right to her in those types of programs. And that blesses me, quite frankly. Like when people respond to that, I'm like, oh God, thank you. Because I remember how lonely it felt. And so I have no qualms about it. I think at first I was worried about being seen as like a DEI person or only talking to, or like these labels. But I was like, those labels are labels that someone placed on me. Those are not labels I'm offering to give out, right? Like I'm just trying to speak to that young person who was in her mid 30s and didn't know what she was doing, and no one was speaking directly to her style.
That's so good.
You know what I mean? So that's how that content and those programs show up. The higher ed stuff is so interesting because I took a step back in year 2, after year 2, and said, who did I enjoy working with the most? And not had fun, but like, who did I say, wow, you really made an impact. Your gifts, your experiences, all that you've been through has helped someone in a way that is really unique. And when I kind of looked at my the folks that I had served that past couple of years, it was higher ed leaders.
Wow.
Yeah, it came from word of mouth, friends of that had higher ed chairs of departments and stuff that was like, hey, you should be talking to her. You're having some problems. You should be talking. And I just started collecting these amazing women that no other leadership coach was speaking to. And I was like, oh, well, of course I want to help you. And it fulfills me in a way that I can't articulate, like helping them to become the next dean or possible provost or president of the university. Like there are enough people supporting Fortune 500 leaders, and I'm happy to take their money too. And if that is in fact, like let's not get crazy, right? But who I want to niche and specialize in is supporting these individuals who are often overlooked. They're those that are underserved. And I believe wholeheartedly that part of my calling from my work is to serve the underserved, is to provide the gifts that God is giving me to those that are either underserved or unserved or unseen. And so Lead by Design Lab, that is an underpinning of the work we do, is who is underserved or unserved that we can go out and use these amazing gifts to support. And so higher ed leaders just became that. And so it's been amazing. It's a hard niche to break into. And some days I'm like, oh, but I need all the money. And so I might want to, and then I'm like, no. And Candice, can I tell you, every time I turn my head, God quickly turns it back. I will get like an email from one of them that will have me bawling. And I'm like, right, God, I'm sorry. You're right. Like every single time I question it, he sends a reminder. And I'm like, right, I am on assignment and let me continue on. So it's been an amazing, amazing opportunity. And I'm grateful to work with them.
That's really amazing. I think it's really important. You point out that this is something you said this was not a sector that you had specific knowledge base in from the outside.
Right.
But you found a fit there, and you got to a place of comfort where you said, this is who I serve. Yeah. And that's a hard leap for people because sometimes it can feel not sensible.
You know what? And you feel like you're not credentialed enough to speak to them, right? Like you're like, who am I to speak to you? I've never been a dean. I've never been a chair, but I've been a professor. I've worked with deans and chairs. I've worked in universities and in the student affairs side. I've interacted with you all. Like, so I had to find like, well, what value do I bring? And guess what? You don't always need to be coached by people who've worked in your same exact sector. Sometimes that diverse perspective is what helps that person get a different aha. So I think for those people that are worried about, one, am I enough to support this, whatever, know that if you're getting the nudge, it's because you're enough, right? And just let that be.
Yeah, no, there's a leader coming up on the cast who it's a product they put out, and they had no educational background in engineering or anything like that for the product, but they saw a pain point that they were experiencing in their lives and went into this. And they're successful because they're addressing something they personally connect with. And that's exactly what you're saying here.
Yeah, I think that more people, Candice, if I'm honest, they're looking more for a connection than for expertise, right? They're looking more for like, do you see me? Do you see me at my most human level? And that most human level is often this level of vulnerability. Do you see my vulnerability and will you keep me safe? Right. And that's what people are looking for. And so I think those higher ed leaders, they know I see them. I see them pass all those degrees and I see their fears and I'll hold it safely and support them as they grow to being who I feel God's called them to be. So, and I always tease them. I'm like, I'm preparing the leaders that my babies are going to be in college with. So y'all need to get it together so my babies can be safe in these schools. So that's kind of the running joke.
This is my investment in their future. Also let them into one of those schools, please.
Right. Also, and if we can do it for free, even better.
Please and thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. I think that's really, I appreciate you delving into that because I think that's a very scary jump for people, but you also went right back to something that's so biblical, knowing each other and being fully known. And that's exactly what God wants with us. And just to know that that's inherent in everyone, no matter what you actually believe, that's a practice of spiritual walk. And what a great ministry around what you do every day.
Oh man, thank you. You said something earlier, right? Like we're not out here proselytizing, but I think in how we walk and how we adhere to the tenets, it is showing the God in us all the time. And I think that's what's made this journey, not to say it's not hard, but it makes it like, I know I'm on the right path, right? I'm like, I know I am in line with the tenets that God has set out for me. So I'm just going to keep pushing forward. So yeah. And I think the higher ed women, when they are being seen, they show up differently for these schools. And I'm not going to lie, some of the schools, they've experienced some real tragedies. And I'm someone they call after. And they're like, yeah, we just had that shooting. Yeah, my team's okay. What do I need to do? And I'm like, do you mean to tell me I am this many miles away, but I'm still able to help you, to help your team feel safe in that tragedy? Thank you, God. Like, thank you for trusting me with such an important assignment. and let me not falter, like help me, lead me. Like, you know what I mean? So there are just ways for us to be in ministry for God's people in unique ways if we answer the call to the niche he's calling us to answer to. Right. And so
Right.
that's been really quite frankly, a humbling experience for me.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. That's real. And those types of things in business, we don't always think about in our day-to-day, but if we are the person who shows up for our clients or our customers or whoever, and we provide something that's different, we get to speak into lives in ways we never thought we would.
That's right.
So
That's right.
I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a little bit about us because we go a few years back. We go way back these days. Probably in this world, we've had a really long friendship in comparison to
10
some.
years, man. 10 years is not anything to sneeze at. It's a whole decade.
This is legit. But in that going back and in our busy schedules, I think people view friendships in different ways and they have different expectations. And I think it's important that you have these friendships that are iron sharpens iron friendships. And I know you and I both have busy schedules, but we will make time for, I like to call it our quarterly or so call. And when we get on this call, we'll block an hour literally in the workday, and we're friends, but most of it's for one of us to kick the other one's butt. I don't really know how else to say it, but it is one of the most awe-inspiring and complicated and challenging conversations I will have in my month, but I need it so bad.
Yeah.
So because I don't think we all take time to find those people when we're at a certain level of leadership. It feels lonely in the company you're in, and then you look around and you know industry people, but you can't be vulnerable with your industry people, right?
Yeah.
In a lot of cases. So finding those mentors can feel cumbersome, and how to do that and not complicate it. And so I feel like you and I have this really good flow. I was hoping you felt the same way when I asked this question.
The last call, boy, I was like, so yeah, I definitely felt.
Well, if we could speak about that a little bit, because I know mentoring is something everyone talks about, but then the actual practice is it feels daunting because you're going like, you're kind of asking someone to be your friend, but it's not like, I want to go to coffee. Like, we need to kick each other's butt and get some work done.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many elements to what we have and how I think others can implement something similar. First of all, is making time for people. And even if it's not for you, right? Sometimes when someone asks, to take a call, whatever, you're like, what's in it for me, right? Like, I'm too busy, I'm too what? And for us, it's such a selfless act. Like, if you call, I stop, drop, and roll. Like, I'm like, because I know that it is going to bless me, even if the topic is not about me, right? Like, I know that there's going to be some reciprocal moment in that engagement. And so I wish, going back to that first, my scripture, that people just remember it's not always about you. Take time and be in service of others, because that's going to bless you. And so that's how I see mentoring. That's how I see anytime anyone asks for a meeting with me. And sometimes it is a day that is full. And I'm like, I got 30 minutes at this time. It could be there was one time, there was a student from USC. I don't know him. I never met him. I don't even remember how he got my information, but he asked for 30 minutes and he wanted to talk about how he could start his own practice. I said, you got it. Who knows how that blessed him, or how that may come back at some point in some way to anyone, right? And so for me, it's just about creating space to be there for someone else. And and that then will allow someone to be willing to do the same for you. And so that's what I think we have. It's like, I'm all in. I'm not distracted. I'm all in, focused on you. And I feel the same when it's my turn to ask for that type of support. And that's how the iron sharpens iron, right? If I'm like, oh, I'm only going to call Candice when I need something, you're not going to give me your full self, right? Why would you? I didn't put a deposit to get a withdrawal, right? I'm just constantly withdrawing. And I think people who are really iron to iron, there needs to be a reciprocity to that relationship. And so that's how I experience ours. Is very reciprocal. It's also really covered in love. When you are going at me or I'm going at you, we know it's to bring out your best self and for you to stay in your walk with God. And I feel the same way. And I'm like, I'm never going to take any reprimand or any correction or anything to be anything less than your love for me. And I think that's a little unique. And you have to kind of build that over time.
Yeah, for sure.
But with a mentor, hopefully you can get to that where you're like, oh, I know. Oh, I know she's kicking me in my teeth right now because I deserve it. And she loves me and wants me to be my best self. Okay. I received that. I received that correction. And we all know correction is in the Bible, right? So we know we need that correction. And so
Yeah.
that part is a little, I think that comes with time, but you first have to like create the environment where people want to do that for you by making yourself selfless and available for them. So that's kind of how I experience and see our work together.
No, same here. And I think it's something I've just been turning over when I think about our relationship is we talk about mentors and I think we teach people sometimes to like write letters and find this person that's like 13 steps ahead of them, which you should have people you ask for feedback that's ahead of you. But your mentoring should also look like you have something to offer each other and you can push each other. And it's not the same skill set. And I think one thing that keeps us, that you've talked about a lot, actually, I think one thing that keeps us from sometimes finding those mentors that are a little bit closer is the imposter syndrome and feeling like we can't offer each other something because we in our minds have written a story that someone's further ahead than us.
That's fair. I think that's a really interesting point. We also, I don't know sometimes if we share our full selves with our friends.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I think that imposter syndrome also comes from like, I'm not good enough and I don't, and I don't even want to share with her what I'm up to or what I'm struggling with, or like we kind of hide a little bit of ourselves, even with our friends. And where that comes from, there's a fear that we're going to be rejected or we're going to be embarrassed if this person doesn't receive what I'm about to share about who I really am or this thing about me. And there's also, if it's not completely a healthy friendship, there's also a bit of competition when you're at that peer level, right? And so you're like, oh, if I tell her, then she might get that, then I won't have it. And, you know, like there's this thing of like scarcity. There's only one of whatever. And so I agree with you. I think peer mentoring is so beautiful and so powerful because we're at the same level. We can be like, oh, I found this thing. Here, you take it so you can use it too. Like that comes with such confidence in who we are and the gifts that we bring to this world that is for us. The opportunities that are for us. There's some confidence that goes with that then lets me share with you or lets me push you harder because I'm not worried about it affecting quote unquote my world. You know what I mean?
No, that's so true.
Yeah. And that's what I think. I have a few amazing folks in my life like that. And the number of times that I'll text someone and be like, oh my gosh, I just found this thing here. And it's like a grant that we both can qualify for. I'm like, yeah, let's both apply. Like whatever's for us is for us. Like I don't need to hoard it so that I can get it. Because that's also not how God works, right? So I'm like, no, here I'm sharing everything because I feel like there's going to be good, a good response for me doing that. So I think I love your point about kind of peer, like on level instead of always trying to talk to the person 4 steps or 5 steps above you. Talk to the person that's doing it right with you so that y'all can do it together. I think it's such a beautiful story, and I'm so grateful to have that in you as a
friend. You're real smart.
So grateful. You're smart too, girl.
Oh man, is there anything I haven't asked you about that you want to make sure you talk about?
I think the one thing I would say, particularly for leaders of faith, is to not hide or be afraid to be who you are fully as a leader and as someone a godly leader, right? Again, we've said a billion times, we're not telling you to like everything is like, well, Philippians did this, but there are ways for you to show up authentically that will honor God and won't make you have to have like this dual personality. You know what I mean? Where cursing like a sailor, and then you come home with it because you want to fit in there. And you want to fit. No, be you all the time, right? And there are so many people. And someone said to me the other day, they were like, "I don't think I've ever heard you curse." I said, "Well, why would you?" Right? Like to me, like I'm not Latoya here and a different Latoya there. Like I am me, and so I would just encourage leaders to just stand fully erect in who you are and be proud of that. Because God will be proud of you, and you'll be able to have greater impact when you don't have to have like whiplash of like, wait, it just stilts you cognitively. It stilts you to have to like think before you do stuff. So
yeah, which personality am I today?
Yeah, just be fully present, just be fully proud, just be you, and I think you will reap all the benefits of that.
No, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that is a real struggle, especially when you're maybe working in a sector where certain things are expected or accepted, and you
Absolutely.
feel like for success you have to fit into those molds.
That's exactly why I'm saying it.
Or
Yeah,
leave pieces of yourself out. And there's a reason you're equipped for the sector you're in. And God knows that. He knew all of that before you went there. And he can use every inch of you, to your point.
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, that would be the one thing I'd want to make sure people remember.
Latoya, has been amazing as always.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun, and I appreciate you even allowing me to say those things out loud, because some of it is like inside me. I'm like, oh yeah, that is why I do these things, or this is how we got here. So thank you.
It's a fun analysis, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was great having you. We'll talk soon.
Okay, take care.